We view oceans as permanent fixtures of our world. We assume massive bodies of water are immune to destruction. But the Earth's tectonic plates absolutely do not care about permanence. Exactly 5.9 million years ago, shifting continents violently slammed the Strait of Gibraltar shut. In the blink of a geological eye, the entire Mediterranean Sea completely evaporated. It left behind a terrifying 2-mile-deep basin of blistering, toxic white salt, where atmospheric temperatures reached a suffocating 176 degrees Fahrenheit. It quickly became the most hostile, dead environment in the history of the planet, until the ocean finally broke back in. In this video, we are descending into the Mediterranean oven, from the tectonic trap that locked the doors, to the boiling high-pressure abyss, to the catastrophic, world-breaking megaflood that brought the sea back from the dead. To truly comprehend how an entire ocean can simply vanish from the face of the Earth, we first have to recognize the profound vulnerability of the modern Mediterranean. It is very easy to look at a standard map and see a vast, permanent body of water, comfortably separating continents and proudly supporting entire human civilizations. But from a strict, unforgiving geological perspective, the Mediterranean is absolutely not a true ocean. It is, in reality, nothing more than a massive, incredibly fragile, naturally doomed shallow puddle. It sits completely exposed to intense, unforgiving solar radiation, and because of this extreme exposure, it constantly loses vastly more water to the blistering sun through aggressive evaporation than it could ever possibly gain from local rainfall or massive emptying rivers. Think deeply about the immense, heavy reliance your own fragile body has on a constant, uninterrupted supply of fresh water just to survive another day. If your critical water supply is suddenly cut off, your cells aggressively wither and fail. The Mediterranean Sea physically operates on the exact same desperate life-or-death principle.
The absolute only reason this beautiful, sprawling sea exists today is because of a single, highly precarious geological umbilical cord. There is an incredibly narrow, 9-mile-wide gap of open water known as the Strait of Gibraltar. This tiny bottleneck acts as a massive, continuous planetary water pump, desperately forcing billions of gallons of cold, fresh seawater in from the vast Atlantic Ocean every single second just to keep the shallow Mediterranean alive and brimming. But the Earth's massive, grinding tectonic plates are always moving, shifting endlessly beneath our fragile feet. And exactly 5.9 million years ago, the immense African tectonic plate slowly, aggressively drifted north and violently collided directly with the immovable bedrock of Europe. The sheer, unimaginably crushing force of this slow-motion continental collision mercilessly forced the deep seabed to buckle and violently thrust upward, creating a massive, completely impenetrable natural dam of solid rock. In a geological heartbeat, the Strait of Gibraltar violently slammed completely shut. The life-giving flow of Atlantic water was instantly blocked. The entire Mediterranean Sea was abruptly and completely isolated, hopelessly trapped under the relentless, aggressively burning sun of a harsh, ancient global climate with absolutely zero hope of rescue. If you were somehow standing on the warm shores of southern Europe at that exact moment, you would have absolutely no idea that the very geography of the world was about to violently end. The massive, immovable tectonic doors were permanently locked, and the trapped water had absolutely nowhere to go. But what truly shocked the geologists who eventually uncovered this event wasn't simply the fact that the sea eventually dried up. It was the terrifying, absolutely apocalyptic speed at which it completely vanished. When we think about major, world-altering geological events, we are biologically conditioned to assume they safely take tens of millions of years to unfold. We casually assume the Earth changes at a crawling, imperceptible pace. but the brute force physics of aggressive planetary evaporation absolutely does not care about our comforting timelines. Without the massive, stabilizing Atlantic Ocean constantly rushing in to refill its deep basin, the doomed Mediterranean Sea did not slowly and gracefully fade away into a series of shallow lakes. It catastrophically plummeted.
The incredibly hostile ancient sun beat down on the trapped water, turning the massive basin into a literal boiling kettle. Geologists calculate that the absolute water level of the entire sea aggressively dropped by an astonishing rate of up to 3 feet every single year. Just process that terrifying mathematical reality. In the lifespan of a single human generation, the coastline would aggressively recede by miles, violently abandoning massive coral reefs and stranding deep-water ecosystems to hopelessly choke in the open air. Within just 1,000 short years, a time frame so impossibly brief it is considered a literal microsecond in deep geological time, an entire sprawling sea, the exact geographical size of modern Western Europe, was entirely, horrifyingly gone. But the water did not simply vanish into thin air without violently leaving its permanent mark. As the massive ocean aggressively boiled away, it left behind the staggering, concentrated chemical residue of its former existence. It systematically dumped billions of tons of deeply dissolved minerals directly onto the dying sea floor. This catastrophic rapid dehydration event created what science now officially calls the Messinian Salinity Crisis. The once teeming, vibrant seabed was aggressively transformed into a blinding, hypertoxic, apocalyptic desert of solid halite and sharp, jagged gypsum. A continent of salt. As the water completely evaporated, it violently compressed these dissolved minerals into massive, suffocating salt crusts that reached an incomprehensible depth of up to 2 miles thick in the deepest trenches. The vibrant, thriving ancient marine life didn't just peacefully die off as the water rapidly receded. Millions of marine creatures were rapidly, brutally, and chemically mummified in what quickly became a continent-sized salt shaker. Their remains were perfectly entombed in the burning white crust. Imagine casually walking out of your front door right now, only to look down into a blistering, endless white void of jagged salt, knowing that every single living organism that once thrived there is permanently locked in the rock. If the idea of an entire ocean rapidly boiling down into a blinding, toxic salt desert terrifies you, hit subscribe to join the Center for Curiosity.
The sprawling Mediterranean was entirely gone, completely replaced by a searing expanse of lifeless, jagged white crystals reflecting the burning sun. But the complete absence of the water had suddenly created a totally new, completely invisible nightmare. The sheer, unfathomable physical depth of the newly emptied basin was so aggressively extreme that it actively warped the actual physics of the atmosphere inside it. To truly understand the sheer, suffocating horror of the fully formed Mediterranean oven, you have to completely abandon your standard human perception of depth and atmospheric pressure. We are physically adapted to live comfortably at or near standard global sea level, but the completely exposed, deeply scarred floor of the evaporated Mediterranean basin plummeted to an incredibly terrifying depth of up to 2 miles directly below the standard global sea level. This extreme, unnatural depth triggered a violent, invisible meteorological phenomenon known as adiabatic heating. As normal, breathable air aggressively sinks down into a massive, deep geological hole, the sheer crushing weight of the atmosphere physically pressing down from above aggressively forces the gas molecules to tightly compress. The deeper the air hopelessly sinks into the basin, the violently denser and impossibly hotter it inevitably becomes. Now, deeply imagine the crushing, physical vulnerability of your own lungs. If you foolishly stood at the absolute bottom of this massive, blinding white basin, the sheer, unrelenting atmospheric pressure pressing heavily down on your chest would violently make every single breath physically feel like you were slowly drowning in thick, boiling air. At a staggering 2 miles down in the dark salt trenches, the absolute atmospheric pressure was a crushing 50% higher than it is at standard sea level today. The trapped air was incredibly thick, physically heavy, and completely, utterly suffocating. And because it was relentlessly baked by the harsh ancient sun from directly above and constantly superheated by the brutal physics of atmospheric compression from all sides, the absolute temperature at the bottom of the basin spiked to an apocalyptic 176 degrees Fahrenheit, a roasting hell.
This was not simply a dry, barren desert on Earth. It was practically a hostile, lethal alien planet, aggressively parked right next to the lush, green forests of ancient Europe. It was significantly hotter than the absolute highest recorded temperatures in modern Death Valley, heavily denser than the pressurized environment inside a deep-sea diving bell, and entirely permanently devoid of any biological life whatsoever. Any wandering, unfortunate animal that accidentally slipped down the jagged, sheer salt cliffs would absolutely never survive the brutal, blistering descent into the high-pressure zone. It was a completely sterile, mercilessly roasting oven of blinding white salt, where absolutely any fragile organic matter that blindly wandered into the deep, suffocating abyss would simply and instantly bake into dry, unrecognizable dust. The sheer oppressive reality of this 2-mile-deep boiling oven of salt defies almost all logical human comprehension. It sounds exactly like a dark, dystopian science fiction fantasy. But modern geological scientists know exactly what horrifying conditions actually happened down there, because the ancient flowing rivers that continued to desperately pour into this dry oven left behind a massive, terrifying, undeniable scar permanently carved deep in the stone. It is completely natural for the rational human mind to immediately address this unbelievable claim with deep skepticism. How can we confidently prove that a 2-mile-deep boiling oven of salt actually existed almost 6 million years ago when we currently see a beautiful blue sea full of life? To find the undeniable truth, we have to look deep under the modern sea floor. During widespread exploratory oceanic drilling and advanced acoustic sonar mapping in the early 1970s, highly confused marine geologists accidentally discovered something mathematically impossible. They hit a completely massive, uninterrupted solid layer of pure crystalline salt buried deeply beneath the thick mud of the modern Mediterranean seabed. They officially named this massive buried anomaly the M reflector. It proved the entire basin had indeed violently dried out. But the absolutely most terrifying, undeniable physical proof of the oven doesn't actually come from the deep ocean floor. It comes directly from the massive, ancient rivers that stubbornly continued to flow toward it. Consider the sheer physical momentum of a massive, roaring river. It cannot simply stop moving just because the ocean it feeds has violently vanished. The ancient, powerful Nile River and the roaring Rhone River still continuously flowed aggressively toward the Mediterranean basin, but instead of safely meeting a calm, level sea at the coastline, they suddenly met a sheer, jagged, terrifying 2-mile vertical drop into a boiling white abyss. The violent geological reality of this massive drop instantly turned these massive flowing rivers into completely apocalyptic, world-ending waterfalls. If you were somehow standing near the unstable, crumbling edge of these massive continental cliffs, the sheer, deafening roar of millions of tons of rushing water violently plunging 2 miles straight down would literally vibrate the dense bones inside your chest, completely deafening you instantly. As the heavy rushing water violently plunged thousands of feet straight down into the blistering abyss, the immense, unstoppable kinetic energy violently and relentlessly carved massive, Grand Canyon-sized gorges directly into the exposed continental shelf. The earth was torn open.
The sheer brutal friction of the falling water aggressively chewed through solid bedrock, creating incredibly deep, jagged canyons that dwarfed anything we see on the surface today. Modern geologists have actually successfully mapped these massive fossilized river canyons using ground-penetrating radar. They are currently buried completely intact under millions of tons of modern dirt and sediment in modern-day Egypt and southern France. The earth literally and violently tore itself wide open just to continuously feed fresh water into the dark, boiling oven. The immense power of the water was absolute. The blinding white oven baked in complete, total oppressive silence for hundreds of thousands of grueling years, but the immense, unimaginable planetary tension on the solid rock dam at the Strait of Gibraltar was slowly, constantly building, and it was just about to catastrophically break in the single most violent, unstoppable flood in planetary history. Exactly 5.3 million years ago, the incredibly long, suffocating nightmare of the Messinian Salinity Crisis finally reached its absolute catastrophic breaking point. To perfectly set the global stage for the unprecedented Zanclean megaflood, we have to look globally. The overall global sea level of the massive Atlantic Ocean slowly shifted upward, and the immense grinding tectonic plates at the fragile Strait of Gibraltar heavily strained under the constantly increasing immense weight of the ocean pressing against the rock.
At first, it started as nothing more than a tiny, insignificant, microscopic trickle of salty Atlantic water that miraculously breached the very top of the crumbling natural stone dam. But the fundamental physics of the Earth dictate that fast-flowing water easily and aggressively cuts through solid rock. That tiny, harmless trickle very quickly aggressively eroded the stone, rapidly widening the narrow channel. The trickle aggressively became a fast-moving stream. The stream violently became a raging, unstoppable river. And then the heavy, compromised stone dam suffered a sudden, absolute, and catastrophic structural failure. The massive, continent-spanning wall of solid rock completely and violently shattered into a billion pieces. The massive, impenetrable doors were violently kicked open, and the entire, unimaginable, crushing weight of the boundless Atlantic Ocean violently poured directly into the waiting 2-mile-deep basin. It is almost entirely impossible for the fragile human mind to accurately comprehend the sheer, unadulterated violence of this apocalyptic geological event. The heavy, dark Atlantic water furiously flowed down into the blistering white oven at a completely incomprehensible rate that was 1,000 times greater than the absolute maximum flow of the modern Amazon River. A wall of water. We confidently build our sprawling coastal cities, assuming the fundamental geography of the Earth is permanently finished. But the chilling reality of the Messinian Salinity Crisis proves that oceans are incredibly fragile. A minor, almost imperceptible tectonic shift can violently delete an entire sea, aggressively bake it into a toxic white desert, and then catastrophically flood it back into existence. And this leaves us with a deeply unsettling truth. The massive African tectonic plate absolutely never stopped moving north. It is still relentlessly grinding into the bedrock of Europe right now. In a few million years, the Strait of Gibraltar will inevitably slam permanently shut again. The Mediterranean oven will definitely return. The only real question is, will anyone be around to helplessly watch the massive water boil?